So here's a little bit of one of my favorite NPR stories, like ever. On April Fool's Day in 2010, the British retailer GameStation inserted a new clause into its license agreement. And the new clause had the checkbox already checked. It was already ticked. And if users didn't uncheck the box, they agreed to grant GameStation a non-transferable option to claim for now and forevermore your immortal soul. GameStation actually said that if it chose to exercise the soul transfer, it would serve notice in 6-foot-high letters of fire. A few years later, at least 6, but maybe more Londoners, I guess this happens over there a lot, they agreed to give away their oldest child in exchange for Wi-Fi access. Before they could get on the internet, users had to check a box agreeing to assign the firstborn child to us for the duration of eternity. The company said, their clause likely wouldn't be enforceable in a court of law. Counselor? I don't know. They said it's contrary to public policy to sell children in return for free services. Maybe in their country. In 2017, 22,000 people signed up for free Wi-Fi, for free public Wi-Fi, and they inadvertently, which means they didn't read everything, they agreed to 1,000 hours of community service, and also written into that community service was the relieving of sewer blockages as part of that work. Are there any new members at Addis? Do you want to go back and check what it is you've signed on to? Look, contracts, reciprocal agreements. Look, they are a critical part of almost any relationship. And in fact, I believe that contracts, reciprocal agreements, are the defining element, perhaps the most important feature of the scrolls that are behind me. I'm aware that reducing the Torah to one essential point is a fool's errand. Emotionally, though, when something calls out to us as hierarchically crucial, any of us at any time, when something tells us this feels like the entirety of it all, it's hard to see anything else in that moment. At least it is for me. So today, what I'm going to try and do is help us, and myself included, avoid missing the fine print. Brit, covenant, the basis of a relationship, conditions for that relationship, and the promises and consequences of those conditions if fulfilled or unmet. Britot, covenants. They can be between two people equally or within a differing power dynamic. They can also occur between a person and God. Covenants, when enacted, are often accompanied by an intricate set of rituals to adorn the pledge and uphold the binding contract. The most famous covenants that you and I see on a regular basis is that of a wedding ceremony in which there is a contract and elaborate ritual to accompany what is essentially the signing of a contract. And the Torah is filled from beginning to end with such agreements, such covenants, and their accompanying rituals. There are 3 examples that I'm going to share with you now. I like to call them the big 3 covenants. In Genesis chapter 9, God establishes a Brit Olam, an eternal covenant with Noah after the flood. I now establish my covenant with you and your offspring. V'zacharti et briti asher beni uvenechem. I will remember my covenant with you. No longer shall there be a flood to destroy the earth. This is the sign of the covenant I set between me and you for all ages to come. I have set my rainbow in the clouds. It shall serve as a sign of the covenant between me and the earth. Just a few chapters later, In Genesis 12 and 15, God establishes a covenant with Abraham and Sarah, promising land, descendants, and blessing. It culminates in this wild ceremony called Brit Ben Habetarim, a covenant of parts, because it was ratified, this covenant with Abraham, literally between the parts of animals that had been chopped up. And the sun was setting, and there was darkness, and here an oven of smoke and a flame of fire went between the pieces. Bayom Hahu, on that day, Karat Adonai et Avram Brit. God made a covenant with Avram, saying, I've given this land to your seed from the river of Egypt to the big river, the river Euphrates. And finally, the covenant God established with the people of Israel at Mount Sinai after God led them out of Egyptian slavery. With it, God provides Torah, the law that is meant to govern and shape the Israelites in the promised land. Ve'ata im shamoa tishma'u bekoli ushmartem et briti. And now if you will listen to my voice, then you'll be a treasure to me out of all peoples, because all the earth is mine, and you'll be a kingdom of priests and a holy nation to me. And this covenant, the covenant of Sinai, also included elaborate ritual with some famous stones and lots of pomp and circumstance and a party for the ages featuring a golden calf at its center. For the most part, though, other than a few other smaller covenants found in the Torah, these are the big three: Noah, Abraham, and Moses. Until I noticed a few weeks ago when rereading Parshat Kitavo towards the end of the book of Deuteronomy. Parshat Kitavo is a parsha for which all of our B'nai Mitzvah students hold their breaths, hoping, praying that their chosen week on the Gregorian calendar offers them something else. One of my recent Kitavo B'nai Mitzvah students opened his Bar Mitzvah Devar Torah with these memorable words: the first time I read Parshat Kitavo, I wanted to quit being Jewish. Grandma loved it. I'm going to keep reading a few lines from what he said because it's just too good. Some lines of my parsha were shocking, like, if you steal from someone, your children will grow horns on their ears, and your crops will fail, or something crazy like that. I was worried for my kids because I steal all the time. He's 13. I was worried for my kids because I steal all the time. Granted, they're pencils, and I asked, can I steal that for a sec? But you get the point. I was confused that a little misdeed like stealing a pencil could have such a big effect on my future kid. About 2 months ago, I started studying, really studying with the rabbi and interpreting my parsha, and my whole view has changed, thank God. My whole view changed too, both studying with this student and once again last week. Because while Parshat Kitavo is known for its extremely explicit and very dark curses, it also contains a chapter that I believe is the essential covenant in Torah. It is also the forgotten covenant, the ignored covenant as well. Kitavo has, nestled between chapter 26 and 28, blessings and curses galore, the fine print of Torah, the box that you either have to check or uncheck before going one step further to do so whole. At the precipice of the land, the Israelites, weary from their 40-year journey, scared about their future in a foreign homeland, receive these instructions from Moses. When you cross over into a land flowing with milk and honey, before going any further, first erect some very big stones on Mount Ebal. Cover those stones with plaster entirely. Then erect an altar for your burnt offerings. Go back to the plastered stones and write on them et kol divrei haTorah hazot be'er hetev. Write all the words of the Torah, presumably the book of Deuteronomy, all of them very clearly, be'er hetev. Then stand one half of the 12 tribes on Mount Gerizim to bless people, and put the other half of the tribes, or 5 out of the 6, on Mount Ebal to curse, to offer the curses. And the Levites, always between, shall stand in the middle and they shall exclaim in a very loud voice to all of the Israelites, and I'm about to give you the covenant, because we're going to take the covenant test together. But I want you to just imagine, if you have been to Israel, those rolling, beautiful desert hills, and I want you to imagine a valley between two of them, and on one stands hundreds of thousands of people, and on the other hundreds of thousands of people, and the tribe of the Levites is in between, looking up at both. And God said, before you go any further, Levites, lay out the terms of the covenant, the contract. Here it is. Cursed be the one who makes a statue or molten thing, an offensive thing to God, a stone engraver's work, and set it up in secret. Ve'anu kol ha'am ve'amru amen. And all of the people shall respond, amen. Cursed be the one who disrespects their father or mother. And all of the people shall say, amen. Cursed be the one who moves a neighbor's property line. And all of the people shall say, amen. Cursed be the one who misleads a blind person on the way. And all of the people shall say, amen. Cursed be the one who subverts the stranger, the orphan, or the widow. And all of the people shall say, amen. Cursed be the one who lies with his father's wife, for he has removed his father's garment. And all of the people shall say, amen. Cursed be the one who lies with an animal. And all of the people shall say, amen. Hope that was an easy amen. Cursed be the one who lies with his sister, whether daughter of his father or mother. And all of the people shall say, amen. Cursed be the one who lies with his mother-in-law. And all of the people shall say, amen. Cursed be the one who strikes down a fellow in secret. And all of the people shall say, amen. Cursed be the one who accepts a bribe to acquit the murderer of an innocent person. And all of the people shall say, cursed be the one who will not uphold the terms of this instruction. And all of the people shall say, and then the chapter 27 of Deuteronomy just ends, and I am left stunned and confused. That was it. What we just experienced together, what you heard and said amen to, thank you, these were word-for-word directions. They were an entry ritual for crossing over into the land of Israel, Eretz Yisrael. We just cosplayed the oath, the covenant to be established by God and the Israelites before one more step could be taken on that holy soil. Mazel tov. Professor Melissa Ramos notes that scholars have long observed that Deuteronomy shares elements with treaties from the ancient Near East, the Hittites, the Arameans, the Assyrians. Here's what the elements of an ancient treaty includes. A narrative preamble, a prehistory, that's the book of Deuteronomy, the retelling of our story. There is always a set of laws or legal stipulations, that would be the Torah. There is always an oath or a pledge of loyalty. That's the amen that you just said. There is almost always a list of curses to accompany a contract. Things that would befall people if they violated the oath. And she notes, Professor Ramos, that the ratification of such treaties and oaths was always an event. An oral recitation of the terms of the treaty, ritual display of the written word of the treaty, animal sacrifice, and the enactment of the curses to be meted out. What I read to you then from Deuteronomy 27 is not a bug of the ancient Near East, it is a feature of the ancient Near East. So now I understand the form of the covenant. I get Deuteronomy 27 in its context, and I'm still left a little bit confused by the content of the 12 admonishments, the 12 curses that I read to you. Why those? Why in this moment did God and Moses believe this was the message the Israelites needed to hear and agree upon before moving further in the land? Upon entry, should we not have ritualized a contract based on what makes us entirely unique, different, and singular. Shabbat, Kashrut, Kiddushin, first fruits, Bikurim, Shlosh Regalim, the three pilgrimage festivals, Sukkot, Pesach, Shavuot. It's all in the Torah. And it's with these sacred practices, it has always been with these sacred practices that Jews have remained moderately cohesive over hundreds of generations. Achad Ha'am actually said it best. More than the Jews have kept Shabbat, Shabbat has kept the Jews. Now crossing the Jordan after 40 years of wandering and war, that's the time for us to care about who sleeps with whom? Common sense dictates, I think, we define and establish our final official covenant with our uniqueness, not such random universal values. Not the fine print. Not so exclaims Moses on behalf of God. A covenant, a contract between God and Israel in this moment, the moment of entry, in this new home, our Torah asks and demands for the very stuff that allows a society to be ethical. The final contract that we make with the master of the world before taking possession of the land is one that demands our society be ethical, because that is a necessary precursor to any or for any ritualized religion to be efficacious. We cannot be one without the other. Commentators and scholars have spilled lots of ink trying to figure out what this list of 12 is really about. The 11th century Spanish commentator Ibn Ezra notes that these prohibitions all describe sins that are commonly committed in secret, or they are sins that are hard for the victim to publicize. Dr. Jeffrey Tigay, in his JPS commentary, writes, expanding upon Ibn Ezra, the anathemas against idolatry and striking down a fellow explicitly refer to secret instances of those offenses. Disrespect towards parents often take place in the privacy of the family circle. Moving a landmark or a property line, that's stealing land. And when done clandestinely. The blind cannot identify those who mislead them. Strangers, orphans, widows have no one to publicly defend them systemically. Bribes and sexual offenses are obviously, Tigay says, private acts. Read this way, according to Ibn Ezra and Tigay, an ethical society is measured by what people do in private when nobody might find out. And it is those possible misdeeds to which we must warn people and then establish a covenant. An ethical society, in other words, is one in which we do not allow people to take advantage of one another when they think they are going to get away with it. An ethical society is one in which we do not allow people to take advantage of one another when they think they are likely to get away with it. I'd like to offer another interpretation of the 12 admonishments that we read together. Let's keep in mind that the Israelites have been and will be, until they cross over into the land and claim it, a powerless people. We were slaves and wanderers. We were at the whim of Pharaoh. We were at the whim of God. They will now be thrust, no choice of their own, into not only agency over their own lives, but the lives of others as well. God, Moses, Torah have a very real concern, and that very real concern is an abuse of power. It is the marginalization of the powerless, the exploitation of the vulnerable with no repercussions. Last week, news outlets around the world reported on stories like this one from the Times. After a months-long odyssey through 7 countries, our Dennis Nazareth finally made it to the United States. Having a deja vu moment. I feel like this happened to me last year. I made a note to myself, fix that. Probably lost that note 12 minutes later. After a months-long odyssey, Mr. Nazareth made it to the United States. During his journey from Venezuela, he was robbed at gunpoint. He had to eat iguanas to survive. He watched people drop and drown of exhaustion beside him as they crossed a lawless jungle before touching U.S. soil. He said, "I decided I would do anything for my daughters." After being harassed by Mexican officials who demanded bribes, he and his group finally arrived. A few days newly arrived from Venezuela. He was standing in a McDonald's parking lot across the street from a San Antonio shelter when a well-dressed woman introduced herself and handed him and 30 other migrants gift cards for the fast food restaurant, which they gladly accepted. Then she made an enticing offer: a free flight to a sanctuary. The place was called Massachusetts. Yet, Mr. Nazareth was surprised when he landed on Martha's Vineyard. "I thought I was coming to Boston," he said. "I ended up on this little island." A few days later, Mr. Nazareth expressed gratitude for the warm reception he received in Martha's Vineyard. "They're treating us super well," he said. "We're getting food and clothing, our needs met." Received, thank God. Met, not measured. Seen, not watched. Helped, not hoaxed. Arur mate mishpat ger. Arur mate mishpat ger. Cursed be the one who subverts the stranger. And all of the people said, if you have been as outraged as I have in hearing about how weary fleeing migrants have been lied to and hoodwinked into boarding trains, if you are as outraged as I am in general about our broken immigration system, if you are outraged that human beings in their hardest moment are being used as political pawns, well, this is the kind of established reciprocal covenant that would stop these high crimes from happening. If you have watched in dismay, as I have, how the disabled and poor in this city have been cast aside and treated like objects in their already too difficult search for dignified housing because, well, nobody will know anyway, they have no voice. Well, this is the kind of covenant that would be established to prevent these injustices from happening behind our backs. If you have watched in horror over the past few days or week as the Iranian regime diminishes human freedom and unleashes its deadly morality police, not to mention the funding and instigating of worldwide terrorism, this is the kind of covenant a society takes in order to quash that kind of abuse of power. If you have raised your voice in protest, and I hope you have, as the minority in this country with far too much power rips medical agency, human dignity, and freedom of religion from the pregnant or potentially pregnant, this is the kind of covenant, Deuteronomy 27, that would hold back the ideations of those who think they can deny liberty with impunity. Chapter 27 is precisely what we need. It is what every generation has needed. It is what most of us have ignored because it's the fine print. Rabbi Avital Hochstein commented on the Brit Olam, the covenant with Noach and the world after the devastating flood. She said, any successful set of relationships is predicated on knowing one's weaknesses and putting systems in place to deal with one's own limitations. The content of the covenant is a statement regarding control over the potential destructive storm, a covenant that is a guarantee the individual will set up boundaries to stop these potential storms. An individual needs to commit themselves, to bind themselves, to make strict, inviolable rules regarding their own behavior, no matter how frustrated or even justified their position, for the sake of lasting relationships. Yes, God did this for God's self after the flood to prevent God's self from doing it again. God set up limitations on God's self. Isn't this, though, like the primary reason or one of them that we gather each year like this to understand our limitations such that we might overcome them? Is this not one of the reasons we beat our chests so often in a few days? But I'd also like us to understand, or invite us to understand, Rabbi Hochstein's words communally as well. We do have larger structural limitations. We have weaknesses. We as a society, any society, has blind spots which require such a covenant to avoid. We too, a community, a city, a country, a synagogue, we require systems in place to protect one another, especially the most vulnerable and voiceless among us, just as the Torah commands over and over and over again. Rabbi Scheiheld wrote about contracts. He said, or covenants. He said, the covenant between God and Israel has two aspects to it. It is a concrete contract on the one hand, and an infinite set of aspirations on the other. The mitzvot are the concrete contract. The mitzvot are the baseline commitment beneath which we may not fall. A life of loving kindness is the height towards which we aspire. Today we stand at the precipice of home. Today we are here at the rebirth of the world, Hayom Harat Olam. What is this time of year, after all, but a reaffirmation of our covenant, our britot, our aspirations, and we publicly perform them in almost exactly the same way our ancestors and the ancient Near Easterns prescribed for their generations. They entered the land, we enter a new year, a new possibility. They retold their story, the book of Deuteronomy. What are we doing most of the time, especially during quiet prayer, but revisiting our lives, what has unfolded for us in the course of life and love and loss? They gathered the entire people in unison, by tribe, all together. We come together, whole as we can be, with the people we love or maybe the people we will come to love. They carefully prepared for elaborate ritual, engraved stones, sacrificial prayer. We spruce this place up a little bit too, both inside and out. We perform elaborate ritual. We offer extensive prayer. They centered the Levites, the tribe responsible for musically accompanying the temple service. We center on these days our music. We rely on our music to shepherd us through the complex liturgy. They ratified their oaths and obligations to one another and to God with Amen. We promise ourselves and each other to try to live up to our potential, and we say a lot of amens. Count them, hundreds. Sure, they framed their covenant in the context of curse. We do it differently, but we do take stock in the choices we make, the choices that are often made for us, and we reflect on the very real consequences. We, Hayom, today, we do it like this. We do it with pomp and circumstance once a year because it's not every day that we enter the promised land. We simply can't come home like this as a community week in and week out. So today, we reaffirm our covenant with the Master of the world. We reaffirm our covenant with each other, and we reaffirm our personal covenants with ourselves. We reaffirm our concrete obligations to one another, but also our infinite aspirations. Today, we do tend to our personal and communal limitations. But today, we read the fine print first. And the fine print for us are the too often ignored, the too often dismissed, or the just missed. Today, we read the fine print especially closely, so that we don't sell our souls together, instead of fill them up. Today, when we make space by naming our limitations, by reaffirming our covenant, we open a portal up to a deeper aspect, something that Rabbi Held alluded to, a set of aspirational relationship material. Today, we rake and we plow in the past and present, and then we reseed in the soil of chesed, the garden of loving kindness. Today, Hayom, we tend to one another. So blessed be the ones who hold themselves, who hold each other, who hold goodness, and commit to all of it, and more, wherever, whenever, and however we can. And all of the people shall say, Shana Tova.